The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched wider than most city blocks. Silver walls rose up to a ceiling covered in moving stars that showed the real galaxy outside. Hundreds of different alien beings sat in their special seats, each one built for their particular body type. The air smelled like metal and the strange perfumes that different species wore. Ambassador Zethruck stood at the center speaking platform. He was tall and thin like a metal rod with dark green skin that looked almost black under the lights. His voice carried across the hall through translation devices that turned his words into sounds each species could understand. "The humans have gone too far," Zethruck said, his words sharp and angry. "They spread across space like a disease. They make new colonies faster than we can count them. They refuse to follow our rules about how many children they can have. They will not change their bodies with genetic medicine to make them less aggressive like civilized beings should." Many of the council members made sounds of agreement. The crystal beings sang high notes that meant yes. The insect creatures clicked their mouth parts. The floating gas cloud people changed colors to show they supported his words. Near the back of the hall, in a simple wooden chair, sat Ambassador Elena Vasquez. She was 60 years old with gray hair pulled back and hands that showed the marks of hard work. She wore a plain blue uniform with no decorations except a small pin showing Earth. Her dark eyes watched Zethruck speak, but her face showed no emotion. "Worst of all," Zethruck continued, "the humans give away their technology to anyone who asks. They share their medical knowledge with primitive species who have not earned it. They teach farming methods to worlds that should buy food from proper merchants. They act like the galaxy belongs to everyone instead of following the natural order where advanced species guide lesser ones." Counselor Yethman floated forward on her crystal platform. Her body looked like living diamond, throwing rainbows of light across the hall when she moved. The humans also refused to pay proper taxes on their trade routes. They claim their ships only carry aid supplies and educational materials, but our inspectors find valuable cargo hidden beneath. "Because people need food more than we need profit," Elena thought to herself. But she did not speak. The accusations went on for 2 hours. The humans built things too quickly. They explored dangerous parts of space without permission. They made friends with species that other council members thought were better left alone. They sent their children to study with alien teachers instead of keeping human culture pure. "The council has been patient," Zethruck said as he reached the end of his speech. "We have given warnings. We have tried to guide humanity toward proper behavior, but they ignore our wisdom. They think they know better than civilizations that mastered space travel while humans still lived in caves." Elena remembered her grandfather telling stories about those caves, how humans learned to make fire and tools and art, how they cared for their sick and buried their dead with flowers. She wondered if Zethruck thought those things made humans primitive or if he simply did not understand them. Therefore, Zethruck announced, "The Council gives humanity this final choice. You have 60 standard rotations to begin following Council law. Submit your colonies to our oversight. Limit your population growth to approved levels. Stop sharing technology without permission. Accept genetic modifications to reduce your aggressive tendencies. Follow the trade rules that keep the galaxy peaceful and orderly." The hall fell quiet. Even the background hum of air recyclers seemed to stop. "If humanity refuses," Zethruck continued, "the Council will impose economic sanctions. Human ships will be banned from Council spaceports. Human goods will be refused at all markets. Human colonies will receive no aid during emergencies. If these measures fail to teach proper respect, the Council will consider military action." To protect galactic stability, Elena stood up slowly. Her chair made a small sound against the floor that seemed loud in the silence. Every eye, sensor, and optical organ in the hall turned toward her. Some of the alien beings had never seen a human this close before. They studied her like she was an interesting animal. "We understand," Elena said. Her voice was quiet but clear. The translation devices carried her words to every corner of the hall. "Thank you for your clarity." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small communication device. It looked like an ordinary phone, the kind humans used for everyday calls. Several council members made sounds of amusement. Such primitive technology compared to their advanced neural networks and quantum communicators. Elena pressed a single button and spoke 4 words. "The garden gates are closing." That was all. She put the device away and began walking toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the huge hall as hundreds of alien beings watched her leave. Some expected angry words or threats or begging. Others thought she might make a dramatic speech about human rights and freedom. Instead, Elena Vasquez walked out of the Galactic Council Hall like someone leaving a routine meeting. The great doors closed behind her with a soft hiss. "That was easier than expected," Yethman said her crystal body chiming with satisfaction. "They know their place in the end." "Humans always bow to superior force," agreed Counselor Thakmer, whose tentacles writhed with pleasure. "Now we can bring proper order to their territories." But something strange began happening across the galaxy within hours of Elena's simple message. On the trading station orbiting Centauri Prime, Dr. Sarah Chun finished treating her last patient, a young Deltari child with a rare genetic condition. She prescribed medicine, updated the medical files, and left detailed notes for whoever would take over her work. Then she packed her personal belongings and walked to the human transport ship waiting at Dock 7 on the mining world of Kepler 442b. Engineer James Rodriguez completed his shift managing the extraction robots. He handed over his access codes to his Vorthok supervisor, cleaned out his desk, and joined the line of humans boarding shuttles to the orbital pickup point. In the great libraries of Arcturus, Professor Maria Santos uploaded her latest translation algorithms to the central database. She left behind years of work helping different species understand each other's literature and scientific papers. Her research notes filled 17 servers, all freely available to anyone who wanted them. The pattern repeated on thousands of worlds across council space. Human doctors finished with their patients. Human teachers completed their lessons. Human engineers wrapped up their projects. Human farmers harvested their crops and left instructions for the next growing season. They took only personal items that could fit in small bags. Family pictures, favorite books, simple tools, children's toys. They left behind homes they had built, businesses they had grown over decades, even gardens they had planted and tended. Some humans had alien spouses or adopted alien children. These families faced terrible choices. A few humans gave up their citizenship to stay with loved ones who could not or would not leave. Others said painful goodbyes, promising to find each other again somehow. Maria Delacroix had spent 20 years married to a crystalline named Yethanol. They had 2 adopted children from different species. At the spaceport, Maria knelt down to hug the children one last time. "Why do you have to go?" asked little Zeph, whose blue fur was damp with tears. "Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Maria said softly. "And sometimes other grown-ups have to make hard choices to try to fix things. Will you come back?" Maria looked into the child's golden eyes. "I hope so, baby. I really hope so." Yethanol placed a crystal hand on Maria's shoulder. "I will care for them as you would, and I will remember what humans taught us about kindness." The human evacuation was so quiet and orderly that many aliens did not notice it happening. Humans simply finished their work, said polite goodbyes, and left. No protests in the streets. No angry messages on communication networks. No threats or demands. Within 72 hours, nearly 8 billion humans had vanished from council space. They left behind infrastructure worth trillions of credits, art collections, scientific research, and gifts of friendship accumulated over generations. The few humans who remained were those who had explicitly chosen to give up their human citizenship. Perhaps 5,000 individuals scattered across the galaxy. Most of them elderly people too sick to travel, or young people who had never known any world but their alien home, on Earth itself. Now empty of permanent residence, the last human ship lifted off from the spaceport in Snow Paulo. The planet's automated systems would maintain the cities and parks for a while. Maybe someone would come back someday to see how the flowers grew without human hands to tend them. In the council hall, Zethric reviewed reports of the human departure with satisfaction. Efficient and complete, he told his assistants. Perhaps. Humans do understand proper respect after all. He had no idea that the galaxy had just lost its immune system. 3 months after the humans left, Station Commander Vextal noticed the smell first. The air in Nexus Station's main corridor had a strange bitter taste that made his throat hurt. He called the maintenance crew to check the air filters, but they found nothing wrong with the equipment. Maybe one of the restaurants is cooking something new, suggested his assistant, a young Deltari named Kefson. But the smell got worse over the next few days, and people started getting sick. Dr. Yithmar ran tests on the air samples and found dangerous chemicals building up in the atmosphere. The scrubbers are working fine, she told Vextal, but something is wrong with the backup systems in Hydroponics Bay 7. Vextal had never paid much attention to the hydroponics bays. Food grew in them somehow, and that was enough for him to know, but when he went to investigate, he found chaos. Plants were dying in their growing tanks. The water recycling system was backing up and flooding the floor. Automated machines that should have been trimming and harvesting crops sat silent and still. Where are the human technicians? Vextal asked the crystalline supervisor Yethkal. There are no human technicians, Yethkal replied, his crystal body flashing confused colors. Humans just worked here sometimes to help with small problems. The real work was done by our automated systems. But as they dug deeper into the station's records, they found something disturbing. The automated systems had been failing regularly for years. Every few days, something would break down or malfunction. The repair log showed thousands of small fixes, adjustments, and improvements. Almost all of them were signed by human names. Dr. Sarah Martinez adjusted pH levels in tanks 12 through 15. Engineer Tommy Walsh replaced worn seals in water pump system. Botanist Lisa Chun modified nutrient mixture for Vorthic grain crops. The humans had not been running the hydroponic systems, but they had been keeping them running. Every small problem that came up, every tiny failure that would have grown into a big disaster, every improvement that made things work a little better, humans had been there to fix it. Without them, the small problems were adding up into big ones. It took 2 weeks to bring in expert technicians from other stations to fix the hydroponics bays. The cost was enormous, and food prices on the station doubled while they waited for new crops to grow. Worse, 3 people died from breathing the contaminated air before they figured out what was wrong. Similar problems started appearing across the galaxy like spots of infection spreading through a body. On the mining colony of Kepler 442b, Supervisor Grathanik watched his production numbers fall day after day. The mining robots still worked fine. The ore processing plants still ran. But somehow they were pulling 30% less valuable minerals from the ground than they had before the humans left. The equipment is identical, Grathanik told his bosses in a video call. Nothing has changed, but everything had changed. The human mining engineer, James Rodriguez, had spent 15 years learning the subtle differences between different types of rock on Kepler 442b. He knew which areas would have the best or which machines worked better in certain conditions, and how to adjust the mining patterns when the geology changed. The automated systems could mine ore, but they could not think about what they were doing. They followed their programs exactly, even when those programs were wrong for the current conditions. Rodriguez had been quietly updating the programs every day based on what he saw and learned. Without him, the machines kept following outdated instructions that wasted time and missed the best deposits. It would take months to retrain the systems and teach them what Rodriguez had learned. The colony's profits for the year were already ruined. Dr. Keftal faced a different kind of problem at the new medical center on Wriggle 4. The building was beautiful, with the most advanced medical equipment in the galaxy. Everything was designed according to the best scientific principles and built with the finest materials money could buy, but patients kept dying, not from lack of treatment, The diagnostic machines worked perfectly and could identify any disease or injury in seconds. The automated surgery systems could perform operations with precision no living being could match. The pharmaceutical dispensers had medicines for every known illness. The problem was that the machines did what they were programmed to do, nothing more and nothing less. When a Deltari child came in with symptoms that looked like Vorthak bone fever, the system diagnosed Vorthak bone fever and gave the standard treatment. But Deltari children metabolize medicine differently than Vorthak adults, and the standard treatment was too strong. Dr. Elizabeth Santos, the human physician who had helped design the medical center, would have known to adjust the dosage. She would have recognized that the child's symptoms were slightly different from typical bone fever and needed a modified approach. The machines could not make those kinds of judgments. Dr. Keftaw started getting reports from other medical facilities across the galaxy. Places that had worked with human doctors were having similar problems. The automated systems were technically perfect but lacked something the humans had provided: the ability to think about each patient as an individual rather than just a collection of symptoms. What did the humans do that our machines cannot? Keftal asked her research team. They made mistakes, said Dr. Yuthanan, her tentacles curling with confusion. Humans were always adjusting treatments, changing procedures, doing things differently from the standard protocols. We thought they were being inefficient. But their patients had better survival rates, Keftal admitted quietly. The economic problems spread like ripples in a pond. The insectoid hives discovered that their trade with the aquatic collective had dropped to almost nothing. For decades, the two species had barely been able to communicate directly. Their languages were too different, their ways of thinking too. Alien to each other, human merchants had served as translators and middlemen. They understood that when the hive said they needed sharp water, they meant acidic compounds for their industrial processes. They knew that the collective's singing metals were actually complex alloys that vibrated at specific frequencies without human interpreters. The hives and the collective could not even agree on what products they wanted to trade, much less negotiate prices and delivery terms. Months of attempted direct communication resulted in confusion, mistrust, and failed deals. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for generations began to break down. Human logistics companies had connected species who would never have worked together otherwise. They had known which alien cultures considered certain colors offensive, which species required specific temperature ranges for their goods, and how to schedule deliveries around religious holidays that differed from world to world. The galaxy's economy had grown used to human flexibility and cultural knowledge. Without it, international commerce became much more difficult and expensive. Captain Veltar commanded a patrol ship, investigating 3 colonies that had stopped responding to communications. The colonies were on the edge of Council space, far from the main trade routes. When his ship arrived at the first colony, Veltar expected to find disaster, perhaps an attack by space pirates or an epidemic. Instead, he found empty buildings in perfect condition. The power still worked. The air recyclers hummed quietly. Food grew in the gardens, but no one was home. Where did they go? Asked his communications officer, a young Vorthik named Kreshenal. Veltar studied the colony records. The settlement had been established jointly by 4 different species: Deltari farmers, crystalline engineers, aquatic researchers, and human administrators. Each group had brought their own skills and knowledge to make the colony work. Look at this, Veltar sighed, pointing to the planting documents. The Deltari needed low-acid soil for their crops. The crystallines required high mineral content for their equipment. The aquatics wanted access to the underground water systems. These species would never normally live together. Then how did the colony succeed for 12 years? Kreshenal asked. The answer was in thousands of small reports and meeting notes. The humans had spent most of their time solving problems between the other species. When the Deltari farmers worried that crystalline mining was affecting their soil quality, humans had developed a testing system that satisfied both groups. When the aquatics needed to modify the water systems in ways that might flood Deltari crops, Humans had designed better drainage. The humans had been the social glue holding the community together. They had organized festivals that celebrated all four cultures. They had created trading systems that were fair to everyone. They had mediated disputes and found compromises that let very different species live in peace. When the humans left, the colony's social structure collapsed. The other species found they had little in common without human translators and organizers to help them cooperate. Within weeks, each group had packed up and returned to their homeworlds. All three colonies showed the same pattern. Diverse communities that had thrived for years or decades fell apart within a month of the human departure. Counselor Zethrak received reports about these problems every day, but he remained confident that they were temporary adjustments. Every change causes some disruption, he told his staff. The galaxy will adapt to. 1 year after the humans disappeared, Captain Morthavel stood on the bridge of his cargo ship and watched his career end. The Andromeda trade route stretched ahead of him like a graveyard of broken dreams. Dozens of ships floated dead in space, their crews either rescued by emergency vessels or already gone forever. Navigation computer shows the safe path, his pilot reported, but the gravitational readings do not match the charts. Morthavel had been flying this route for 20 years. It connected 15 star systems in a complex dance around black holes, neutron stars, and unstable gas giants. The route was dangerous but profitable, cutting weeks off the journey between the industrial worlds and the agricultural planets. The route had been designed by human astrophysicists 50 years ago. They had calculated the precise paths that ships could take to use gravity for speed while avoiding deadly radiation and crushing forces. More importantly, they had updated those calculations every month as the stars moved and conditions changed. "Sir," the communications officer called. "Out. I am receiving a distress signal from the merchant vessel Dawn of Prosperity. They are caught in a gravity well near the Kethmer system. Their engines cannot break free." Morthavel closed his eyes. That was the 5th ship this month. The Dawn of Prosperity carried medical supplies for 3 worlds and food for 2 space stations. If those supplies did not arrive, people would die. "Set course for home," he ordered. "Send a message to all ships in this sector. The Andromeda route is closed indefinitely." The collapse of the trade route sent shock waves through the galactic economy. 15 star systems suddenly found themselves cut off from vital supplies. Food shipments that normally took 3 weeks now required 2 months using alternate routes. Industrial equipment that factories needed to keep running was trapped on the wrong side of the galaxy, on the manufacturing world of Vex Prime. Factory supervisor Greltoth watched his production lines shut down one by one. His factories made the atmospheric processors that kept space stations livable, but he needed rare metals from the outer rim to build them. Those metals normally came through the Andromeda route. "How long until we can get supplies through the alternative routes?" Greltoth asked his logistics manager. 6 months minimum, came the reply, assuming the other routes do not fail as well. 6 months. The space stations that depended on new atmospheric processors would start having air quality problems in 2 months. Some might become uninhabitable before new equipment could reach them. The Methane Worlds Coalition faced an even worse crisis. Their gas giant processing stations had been designed by human atmospheric engineers who understood the complex chemistry of turning poisonous gas into breathable air for other species. The stations worked perfectly when everything ran normally, but they needed constant small adjustments to handle changes in pressure, temperature, and chemical composition. Chief Engineer Euthanol had tried to maintain the processing stations, using the technical manuals the humans had left behind. The manuals were complete and detailed, but they could not account for every possible situation. When Solar Storm Gamma 7 hit the methane worlds, it changed the atmospheric pressure on all 6 gas giants at the same time. The human engineers would have quickly calculated new settings for the processing equipment. Euthanol and his team spent 3 weeks trying to figure out the right adjustments. By then, it was too late. The oxygen shortage had already begun. We need to evacuate non-essential personnel from stations 7 through 12, Yothanel reported to Coalition Command. We simply cannot produce enough breathable air to support full populations. Tens of thousands of workers were forced to leave their jobs and homes. The economic loss was enormous, but the alternative was watching people suffocate. Even worse than the technical failures were the social collapses. The Great Library of Arcturus had been the galaxy's center of learning for 3 centuries. Every species contributed their knowledge, and scholars from across the stars came to study and research together, but knowledge meant nothing if different. Species could not understand each other. Professor Zephanis, the library's new director, faced a problem that seemed impossible to solve. The library contained millions of documents, research papers, and cultural records from hundreds of different species. Much of this information was stored in ways that only made sense to the species that created it. Crystalline mathematical proofs were written in harmonic frequencies that other species could not hear. Aquatic historical records were stored in pressure-sensitive formats that would be destroyed if taken out of water. Insectoid agricultural data was encoded in chemical markers that most species experienced as meaningless smells for decades. Human scholars had served as translators and interpreters. They had developed computer programs that could convert crystalline harmonics into visual patterns, translate aquatic pressure records into standard text, and turn insectoid chemical codes into numerical data that anyone could read. Without the humans, the library was becoming a Tower of Babel. Species could still access their own knowledge, but they could not learn from each other. Research that required combining insights from multiple cultures became impossible. We are losing centuries of collaborative work, Professor Zephanis told the library board. If we cannot restore the translation systems, much of our shared knowledge will become useless. Then hire new translators, suggested board member Kaffmore. We have tried, Zephanis replied sadly. Other species can learn to translate between 2 or 3 different knowledge systems. But humans somehow understood dozens of them simultaneously. They could see connections and patterns that escaped the rest of us. The medical disasters were the most frightening. Dr. Yithmar had thought the problems on Nexus Station were bad, but they were nothing compared to what happened when the plague of Rigel 7 began spreading. The plague was not new. Similar diseases had appeared every few decades for centuries. Each time, medical teams led by human epidemiologists had contained the outbreak before it could spread beyond 1 or 2 star systems. They had developed flexible response protocols that could adapt to new mutations of the plague organism. This time, there were no humans to lead the response. Dr. Keftel, now promoted to head of Galactic Disease Control, followed the standard procedures exactly. She identified the plague organism, determined its method of transmission, and prescribed the approved treatments. The response was textbook perfect according to every medical manual in the galaxy. But the plague kept spreading anyway. The organism has mutated, Dr. Keftal reported to the Medical Council. It no longer responds to our standard treatments. We need to develop new medicines. How long will that take? Asked Council Chairman Valther. With proper research and testing, perhaps 2 years. 2 years. In 2 years, the plague could spread to hundreds of worlds and kill billions of people. The old human-led teams had been able to develop new treatments in weeks or even days by taking risks and making educated guesses based on experience. The formal scientific process was safer but much slower. By the time new medicines were ready, 17 star systems had been placed under quarantine. The economic disruption was catastrophic, but the alternative was letting the plague spread throughout the galaxy. The political consequences were even worse than the medical and economic disasters. On the frontier worlds, entire regions began declaring independence from the Galactic Council. Governor Thekanol of the Outer Rim Federation stood before his planetary assembly and read a declaration that sent shockwaves through council space. The Galactic Council has proven unable to maintain the basic services that civilized worlds require, he announced. Trade routes have failed, medical emergencies go uncontrolled, essential supplies cannot be delivered. We therefore declare our independence and will govern ourselves until the Council demonstrates that it can fulfill its responsibilities. 12 other star systems joined the Outer Rim Federation within a week. These regions had been held together by human diplomats who understood that effective governance required flexibility, cultural sensitivity, and the ability to find compromises that different species could accept without human mediators. The rigid legal frameworks preferred by most Council species simply did not work. Laws that seemed fair to crystalline thinkers felt oppressive to Deltari individualists. Policies that satisfied Vorthic efficiency standards violated aquatic traditions about community decision-making. The Council tried to send military forces to bring the rebel systems back under control, but even that failed. The fleet commanders discovered that their supply lines depended on the same trade routes that had already collapsed. Their ships ran out of fuel and spare parts before they could reach the rebel territories. Counselor Zethric called an emergency session of the full Council. For the first time since the human exodus began, he admitted that the galaxy faced a serious crisis. We are experiencing temporary difficulties, he told the assembled representatives. But these problems have natural solutions. Other species will learn to fill the roles that humans once performed. We must be patient while the galaxy adapts to its new circumstances. But privately, Zethric was beginning to panic. Intelligence reports showed that the problems were getting worse. Not better. More trade. 2 years after the humans vanished, Admiral Kreshtoll stood in the command center of the Galactic Defense Station and watched civilization die. On the main screen, red warning lights marked the advance of the Void Swarm across the outer rim of the galaxy. Each light represented a world consumed, its population either dead or converted into more machines for the swarm. How many worlds have we lost this week? Admiral Kreshtoll asked her tactical officer. 17 confirmed destroyed, came the reply. 23 more have gone silent and are presumed consumed. The swarm is accelerating. Kreshtoll had studied the history of the Void Swarm in military school. It was an ancient enemy, older than any current civilization. The swarm consisted of self-replicating machines that consumed entire planets to build more copies of themselves. Every few centuries, the swarm would wake up and try to expand, but the galaxy's defense networks had always contained it at the rim. Until now. What is the status of the adaptive defense grid? Kreshtoll asked. That is the problem, Admiral, her science officer reported. The defense grid is not adapting. The swarm has learned to counter our standard tactics, but our systems continue using the same responses that worked centuries ago. The adaptive defense network had been designed by human military engineers 200 years earlier. It used artificial intelligence to analyze swarm behavior and develop new countermeasures faster than the machines could adapt. The key was that human programmers constantly updated the AI, teaching it to think in creative and unpredictable ways, without humans to guide it. The defense AI had become rigid and predictable. It followed its original programming perfectly, but it could not learn or grow. The Void Swarm's own adaptive systems had surpassed it months ago. Can we reprogram the defense grid ourselves? Kreshtoll asked. We have tried, the science officer replied. But the human programming techniques are too advanced for us to understand. We can maintain the existing systems, but we cannot improve them. On the screen, another world's signal went dark. The swarm was now only 6 months away from reaching the first inhabited systems in Council space. The Council met in emergency session, but the meeting felt like a funeral. Half the member species were dealing with their own crises and could barely maintain communication with the capital. The other half were preparing to evacuate their populations to the galactic core, abandoning the frontier regions entirely. We need to find the humans, Councillor Velther declared. They are the only ones who understand how to fight the Void Swarm. We have been searching for 2 years, Zethric replied, his voice hollow with exhaustion. They have vanished completely. Our best intelligence services have found no trace of human civilization anywhere. Then we search harder, insisted Counselor. Yethman, though her crystal body flickered with despair, Send exploration ships beyond the galactic rim. Check every system, every asteroid, every piece of space debris. The search fleets launched within days, spreading out in all directions. From known human territories, they found empty colonies, abandoned space stations, and planets that looked like the humans had simply walked away from them. But no signs of where 8 billion people had gone. Commander Thexol led the search of the former human colony world. Terra Nova, his team landed expecting to find ruins or at least some clue about human plans. Instead, they found a world that looked like a carefully tended garden. The cities were intact and clean. The power system still worked. Parks and gardens bloomed with flowers from dozens of different worlds. But there were no humans anywhere. In the center of the capital city, the search team found a single monument made of simple black stone. Words were carved into it in the universal galactic script. We were here, we helped, we remember. That was all. No explanation, no forwarding address, no hint about where the humans had gone or why they had left. Search every building, Thexol ordered his team. There must be some record of their evacuation plans. They searched for 3 days. The humans had left behind libraries full of books, museums full of art, and workshops full of tools. But they had taken all their personal records, all their computer files, and all their navigation charts. It was as if they had carefully chosen what to leave and what to take. The most disturbing discovery came in the government archives. Dr. Lithian, the team's archaeologist, found a restricted section that required special clearance to access. The files inside made her tentacles curl with shock. "Commander," she called, "you need to see this." The files contained intelligence reports dating back 3 centuries. They described threats that the Council had never heard of: creatures from dark space that fed on civilizations, ancient machines that harvested entire species, and energy beings that could corrupt technology from within. Every major crisis in galactic history was there, but told from a completely different perspective. The plasma wars that had nearly destroyed the crystalline hegemony were not random conflicts. They had been defensive actions against dark space invaders. The Grey Goo incident that consumed 3 star systems was not an industrial accident. It was a failed attempt to terraform worlds as weapons. Most shocking of all, humans had been fighting these threats for centuries. While the Council believed they were dealing with separate, unrelated problems, humans had been coordinating a galaxy-wide defense network against enemies that most species could not even perceive. Why did they never tell us? Thexol asked. Dr. Lethian pointed to another file. According to this, they tried multiple times. But every time humans tried to warn the Council about these threats, they were accused of trying to create panic to increase their own power. The final entry in the files was dated 3 days before the human exodus. It was a single line written by Ambassador Elena Vasquez. "They will not listen. We cannot force them to see the danger. We must prepare for what comes next." As the search teams reported their findings back to the Council, a terrible picture began to emerge. Humanity had not been the aggressive, expansionist species that the Council had believed. They had been refugees from these same dark space entities that were now attacking the galaxy. Their rapid colonization had not been conquest. It had been an attempt to build enough defensive positions to protect everyone else. The humans knew this was coming, Counselor Yethman whispered during the emergency briefing. They were trying to prepare us for a war we could not see. Then where are they now? Zethric demanded. If they were our protectors, why did they abandon us? The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep Space Monitoring Station Omega-7 detected unusual energy signatures in the void between galaxies. The readings were faint and far away, but they matched the profile of human antimatter drives. Captain Velmorth volunteered to take his fastest scout ship beyond the galactic rim to investigate. The journey would take weeks and might be a one-way trip, but the Council was desperate for answers. What he found in the darkness between galaxies changed everything. A massive space station floated in the void, larger than anything the Council had ever built. It was surrounded by a fleet of human ships, but these were not the civilian vessels that had left Council space. These were warships, built for fighting enemies that conventional weapons could not touch. As Captain Velmorth's ship approached, he received a communication on a frequency that had been silent for 2 years. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Force," the voice said. "You should not be here, Captain. The space around this station is extremely dangerous." "Admiral Chun," Velmorth replied, his voice shaking with relief at hearing a human voice again. "The galaxy is under attack. The void swarm has broken through our defenses. We need your help." And there was a long pause before Admiral Chun replied, "Captain, the void swarm is just the beginning. We detected the true enemy mobilizing 3 years ago. That is why we had to leave. We could not protect the galaxy while also protecting ourselves from what was coming." "What enemy?" Velmorth asked. "The same enemy that destroyed our original homeworld," Chun said quietly. "The same enemy that has been hunting us across the universe for 1,000 years. They call themselves the Harvesters, and they consume entire civilizations to fuel their growth. The Void Swarm is just one of their tools." On Captain Velmorth's sensors, new contacts began appearing. Ships unlike anything he had ever seen were emerging from the darkness beyond the station. They were massive, organic-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "The Harvesters have found us again," Admiral Chun continued. "We are about to begin humanity's final battle. If we lose, they will consume this galaxy and move on to the next. If we win, there might still be time to save your worlds. What can we do to help?" Velmorth asked. "Go back to the Council," Chun replied. "Tell them the truth about what is happening. And tell them this: we tried to save everyone, but you would not let us. Now we can only save who we can. Gather your evacuation fleets. Find worlds in the deep galactic core where the Harvesters might not look. Because whether we win or lose out here, the galaxy you knew is already gone." The transmission ended, leaving Captain Velmorth alone in the darkness between stars. Behind him lay a galaxy tearing itself apart. Ahead of him, humanity was preparing to fight a war that would determine the fate of all life in the universe. 5 years after the humans left, Counselor Zethrak sat in the ruins of the Great Council Chamber and wept. The silver walls were blackened by void fire. Half the ceiling had collapsed, letting cold space wind whistle through the broken dome. The moving star display that had once shown the glory of galactic civilization now flickered with dying lights as system after system went dark. Of the 300 species that had once sat in this hall, fewer than 50 remained. The rest were gone, consumed by the void swarm, harvested by dark entities that fed on consciousness itself, or simply fled to hiding places in the deep galactic core. Zethrak's own people, the proud Vorthok Empire, existed now only in emergency shelters on 12 heavily defended worlds. Their great industrial complexes were silent ruins. Their star fleets were scrap metal floating in the void. Everything they had built over millennia was gone. "The final evacuation ships are ready to depart," reported his aide, young Kreshtal. She had aged decades in the past 5 years, her scales dulled by stress and her voice hollow with loss. "The core worlds are prepared to receive the last refugees." Zethrak nodded but did not move from his chair. Around him, the few surviving council members gathered in the shattered chamber for what they all knew would be their final meeting. Counselor Yethman floated nearby, her crystal body cracked and dim. Half her light had died when her homeworld was consumed. Counselor Velther supported himself on a walking stick, his once proud tentacles withered by age and sorrow. "How many made it out?" Zethrak asked, though he already knew the answer would break his heart. "From the outer rim, less than 10%. Kreshtal replied. "From the middle colonies, perhaps 30%. The core worlds still have most of their populations, but they are overcrowded and running short of resources. 10%. Out of trillions of beings who had lived in the outer regions of the galaxy, only 1 in 10 had escaped the harvest. The rest were gone, not just dead, but completely consumed. Their very essence fed to ancient hungers that the Council had never imagined could exist." "Have we heard anything more from the humans?" asked Yethman, her voice barely above a whisper. Zethrak shook his head. The last communication from the human fleet had come 6 months ago, a brief message saying they were still fighting, but taking heavy losses. Since then, silence from the void between galaxies where humanity made its final stand. Dr. Lithian, now the Council's chief archivist, carried a datapad containing the most shameful discovery in galactic history. She had spent 3 years piecing together the truth from recovered human records, and what she had learned made her sick with guilt. "I have completed the analysis of the Human Defense Archives," she announced to the gathered survivors. "The full scope of what we missed is devastating." She activated her datapad, and holographic images filled the air above the broken council chamber. They showed star charts spanning not just their galaxy but dozens of others. Lines connected. Different regions, showing movement patterns and defensive networks that stretched across the universe. "Humanity was not from our galaxy originally," Dr. Lithian began. "Their homeworld was in the Andromeda Galaxy, 30 million light-years away. It was destroyed by the entities they call harvesters over 2,000 years ago." The assembled council members stared in shock. They had known humans were refugees, but the true scale of their journey was unimaginable. "The harvesters are not just galaxy destroyers," Lithian continued. "They are universe destroyers. They move from galaxy to galaxy, consuming every form of organized life and using that energy to travel to the next target. Humanity has been fighting them across multiple galaxies for millennia." More images appeared, human settlements in places the Council had never heard of. Battles fought in the space between galaxies, desperate evacuations from dying worlds. Each image told the same story, humans running from an unstoppable enemy while trying to save whoever they could. "When humans first arrived in our galaxy 800 years ago, they were exhausted," Lithian said. "They had been fighting and fleeing for over 1,000 years. But instead of hiding or giving up, they began building defenses to protect us from the same fate that had befallen their original home." Zethrak felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What kind of defenses?" "Everything," Lithian replied. "The plasma wars that we thought were civil conflicts, humans were actually fighting harvester scouts that had infiltrated crystalline space. The Grey Goo incident that consumed 3 star systems, humans contained it before it could spread to inhabited worlds. Every major crisis we faced, humans were there first, fighting threats we did not even know existed." The holographic display showed the network humans had built over centuries, hidden bases in empty star systems, monitoring stations disguised as research facilities, weapons platforms that the Council had thought were deep space telescopes. "Oh?" "Of it connected in a vast early warning system designed to detect harvester activity." "They were protecting us the entire time," Yethman whispered, her crystal form trembling. "And we never knew." "Worse than that," Lithian said quietly. "They tried to tell us." One found over 200 formal reports submitted to various council committees over the past 3 centuries. Humans repeatedly warned about these threats and offered to share their defensive technology. Every single report was either ignored or dismissed as human fear-mongering. She brought up specific documents, warnings about dark space entities that were marked as unsubstantiated claims, offers to upgrade galactic defenses that were rejected as human attempts to gain military influence, and desperate pleas for cooperation that were filed away as alarmist propaganda. "We called them aggressive because they built so many ships," Valthor said, his voice breaking. "We called them expansionist because they spread so quickly across space. We called them paranoid because they always seemed ready for war." "They were ready for war," Lithian confirmed. "A war they had been fighting longer than our civilizations had existed. And they were fighting it alone because we refused to believe. The enemy was real." The final piece of evidence made everyone in the chamber fall silent. It was a personal message from Ambassador Elena Vasquez, recorded the night before the human exodus began. Her image appeared in the center of the chamber. An elderly human woman with tired eyes and hands marked by decades of hard work. She looked directly at the camera as if she could see through time to this moment. "If you are watching this," Elena said, "then the harvest has begun and we were not able to stop it in time." I want you to know that we tried. For 800 years, my people have tried to protect this galaxy. We shared our technology. We fought your wars. We died in battles you never even knew were happening. She paused, and for a moment her composure broke. When she continued, there were tears in her eyes. We did not want to leave. This galaxy became our home. Many of us were born here, lived our entire lives here, fell in love here. But you would not let us help you prepare for what was coming. You saw our defenses as threats, our warnings as lies, our friendship as manipulation. Elena wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. We cannot force you to let us save you. We cannot make you understand danger you refuse to see. But we will not abandon you completely. When the darkness comes, remember this: we tried to warn you. And somewhere beyond the rim, we are still fighting. The message ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. They knew, Zethric whispered. They knew we would drive them away, and they still tried to protect us. Even after we rejected them, Yethman added. They continued fighting the enemies that threatened us. Dr. Lithian nodded sadly. The final entry in Ambassador Vasquez's personal log says that humanity was evacuating to a fortress system they had prepared beyond the galactic rim. They took with them genetic samples from every species in the galaxy, cultural archives, technological databases, everything needed to restart civilization after the harvest. They planned to rebuild, Velther realized. Not just human civilization, but all of us. If any of us survived, Lithian corrected. The humans expected the worst. They prepared for the possibility that they might be the only ones left to remember what our galaxy had been. Outside the broken chamber, another evacuation. Transport lifted off, carrying the last refugees toward the uncertain safety of the galactic core. The great civilization that had once spanned millions of worlds was collapsing into a handful of hidden colonies. And even those might not survive if the harvesters completed their conquest. Zethruck stood slowly from his chair and walked to the shattered window that once looked out on the capital city. The city was empty now, its buildings dark and lifeless. In the distance, he could see the glow of fires where automated systems were destroying sensitive records to keep them from falling into enemy hands. What do we do now? Kreshtal asked. We follow the evacuation plan, Zethruck replied. We go to the core worlds and try to survive long enough to hope. Hope for what? Zethruck thought about Elena Vasquez's words about humanity still, fighting somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, about the impossible courage it took to keep battling an enemy that had already